So I first started saving my vegetable seeds because I wanted free seeds. I like free. My husband calls me the absolutely cheapest person he knows. I like to think of myself as thrifty, and it's true. Saving seeds is you will save some money. However, the more I learned about seed saving and the reasons that seed saving is a good thing, my motivations changed. First thing I learned was that saving seeds lets me be more self-sufficient. I can um, I can control what I'm going to plant. I'm not dependent on what the big box companies and the seed companies are trying to sell me. Um, I can't walk into Tozer's these days without seeing that giant seed rack with all the sexy pictures of a million kinds of tomato varieties. I'm a sucker for that. But what's being offered in most cases isn't really suitable for growing here in Mason County. We're in USDA growing zone 8B, 9A. And so, for example, the big boy tomato, which is front and center of every seed catalog, every seed rack you see, the big boy tomato has a harvest time of 78 days. And then there's another tomato called the Sun Gold, which is a smaller tomato. It might not be quite as sexy, but it's a delicious tomato. It has a harvest time of 57 days. So that's a difference of 21 days or 3 weeks. And again, in Shelton, our average summer is 2.8 months. So 3 weeks can be the difference between ending up with a tomato that's fully ripe and juicy and delicious versus a tomato that you had to harvest because the freeze was coming and it's not quite fully ripe and it might be a little bit hard. Um, so, that's a big difference. I can also control when I plant, when I have my own seeds. I'm not reliant on the big box stores again to be selling me seeds or seedlings. Like I've seen, I don't want to mention the big box name, but I've seen tomato seedlings being offered, as early as March. And everybody knows that's not the time you want to be planting tomato seeds or seedlings. You want to wait until the soil is warmer. March is not then. And if you have your own seeds, you can control when you plant. Let me take this opportunity to put in a shameless plug for our plant sale in May. We plan to have a very large variety of heirloom seeds that are acclimated for our climate here in Mason County. So I hope to see you all there. Saving your own seeds will give you control over somewhat of your food supply. You're not reliant on purchasing just what the supermarkets want to sell you. You can grow what you want to grow when you want to grow it. And lastly, it's actually it's fun. Here, I forgot to change the slide, sorry. It's fun. There's a huge community of seed savers online and here in Shelton. And I've never met a seed saver who the first thing out of their mouth after they said hello was, "Would you like some free seeds?" So it's a great community. There was a study published, a USDA study published in 2004 that showed a decline in the nutritive value of our vegetables in the last 50 years. And on average, here's a bunch of numbers here, 38% drop in vitamin B, 15% drop in vitamin C. What this translates to is, say, in the case of broccoli, a 20 to 40% drop in the nutritive value of broccoli. And what this results in is what they call hidden hunger, which is when you have a decline in micronutrients compared to like a decline in protein or a decline in calories. And they think there's 3 reasons for this decline. The first thing is that industrial agriculture is prefers to grow crops now that are bigger and that are bred to withstand the rigors of cross-country shipping. But this comes at the sacrifice of nutrient value. Beauty at the cost of nutrition. The second reason they think is because big agriculture uses synthetic fertilizers that are higher in nitrogen and phosphorus. So the plants grow bigger and they produce more cellulose, which is the stuff in the cell walls that makes your vegetable stiff. But again, your nutrient value is diluted. And I kind of liken this to, cardboard. You're basically eating a piece of cardboard. And lastly, the changes in carbon dioxide, and this affects all plants, have resulted in plants with fewer leaves, and the leaves that are there are thicker, and they have fewer stomata, the pores on the back of the leaves, which is where a plant breathes. And so it transpires, and transpiration is what powers the plant's circulatory system, the xylem and the phloem, which is how the water gets from the roots up to the leaves and back down again. And so, I mean, any organism that has a compromised circulatory system, plant or animal, is not going to be the most healthy. So, I hate to waste money, so I want to get the most bang for my nutritive buck. So I tend to grow my own greens. They're really easy to grow, spinach, chard. So first question you want to ask yourself is, what seeds do you want to save? Most people want to save everything. That's the first impulse you'll have. But once you get past that, let me suggest that you want to save seeds from open pollinated plants. Now, open pollinated plants are plants that are pollinated naturally out in the open by wind or rain or critters of some sort. Plants grown from open pollinated seeds will grow what they call true to type, which is they'll grow to look like their parents. By saving seeds from open pollinated plants, you get a bunch of benefits. The first thing is you can gradually adapt a specific variety to our growing conditions here in Mason County. And you do this by growing up a bunch of plants, you look them over, pick out the biggest and the best and the healthiest, save seeds from those plants, plant those next year, grow up your next crop, save the seeds from the biggest and the best and the healthiest from that crop, and then plant those. And sequentially over time, what you end up with is a plant that's been naturalized to our local conditions here. And that's going to be a really healthy plant that's able to adapt to whatever the local climate gods throw at you. I've only been here 2 years, and every month is a surprise. So now this is in contrast to hybrids, which, don't get me wrong, hybrids have their place. They're usually F1 in the catalogs. Hybrids are bred for specific traits like resistance to a disease or a pretty pink color, something like that. But because of that emphasis on just that one characteristic, they're often not able to adapt to changing conditions. So growing open pollinated seeds will also allow you to preserve heirloom varieties that you might not be able to find anywhere else. There are some seed catalogs that specialize in heirloom varieties, but there are a lot of heirloom varieties that are passed down from hand to hand, and this is the only way that they're perpetuated. So you can participate in that effort, which I think is great. So another question you want to ask yourself is, what do you like to eat? When I was first growing vegetables back in California, my first year I grew a ton of kale because it was one of the few things that actually germinated. My husband has a limited tolerance for kale. So we ended up giving a lot of it away. So you need to ask yourself, what do you like to eat? If you like to eat carrots, grow carrots. Don't grow kale. Do you want to grow annuals or biennials? Annuals are pretty straightforward, just like it says. You plant the seed, it grows, you harvest the seed, it dies, and this happens all in 1 year. Biennials are a little more complicated. These are things like your cruciferous vegetables, carrots, beets, and those are things you plant. The first year they grow up, they throw up a lot of vegetative matter, and then they overwinter, and then the second year is when they set seed. The plus side of biennials is that you get a lot of seed from each plant, and the flowering piece of it is usually just beautiful, like onions have a beautiful seed head. The downside is they take up space in your garden, and I'm lazy and I don't like to have to, baby them over winter. Sometimes some of them need winter protection. And so I usually stick with annuals, but it's whatever you guys want to eat, your choice. Another thing you want to think about is how easily does the plant that you want to grow cross-pollinate? Now, cross-pollination is a good thing because most plants have evolved to prevent self-pollination because cross-pollination enhances diversity. So cross-pollination occurs when you have two plants of the same genus and species, but a different variety when they cross-pollinate. So for example, right here, you've got butternut squash. me see if this works. Right here, this is the genus and the species name. So butternut squash is Cucurbita moschata. Fuchsia squash is Cucurbita moschata. Same genus and species, different varieties. These two will cross-pollinate. So corn cross-pollinates like crazy. Brassicas like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage and cauliflower, they will cross-pollinate like crazy. Now, just because they can cross-pollinate doesn't mean that they will cross-pollinate. Like tomatoes technically can cross-pollinate, but it's not that common for if you have two tomato varieties next to each other to cross-pollinate because of the way the flower is constructed. They have the anther, which is the piece that has the pollen, the male pollen, that's very closely around the stigma, which is the female part. So pollen doesn't have to go very far to get from there to here. So they often self-pollinate, but they can cross-pollinate. So how do you get around this problem? I mean, squash is one of those really popular vegetables to grow, and it's pollinated by insects. If you look at the internet, it says you should leave half a mile between varieties of squash. Yeah, get real, right? No, nobody's going to do that. So you can either grow one variety of squash, but who does that? It's like boring, right? I don't, nobody does. So here's how you get around it. You take your butternut squash and you plant it next to a zucchini, because the zucchini is a different species. Right here, it's a pepo. These two will not cross-pollinate. And you can then also plant a Hubbard squash right next to it, because it's a Cucurbita maxima. It's a different species. These will not cross-pollinate. So that's one way of getting around it. You can find all these names, just look up whatever you're interested in on the internet and just make sure that the species name is not the same, and you should be able to plant them close together without cross-pollination. Another way of approaching the whole cross-pollination issue is to embrace it. There's a lot of people that will take a bunch of different varieties of squash or tomato or whatever it is. They'll plant them all really close together. They'll let them cross-pollinate like crazy. They want them to. And then they'll plant those seeds, and they will look at the next generation, and they'll pick the plants that are the healthiest or have the characteristics that they want. And then they'll plant all those. They'll get a whole bunch of different kind of plants again, but they'll let them all cross-pollinate like crazy again. And then they'll keep on doing this sequentially until you could eventually develop a new variety, which is admirably suited for the conditions in your yard. And you can name it after yourself. What the heck? So just a few words on seed saving basics. I'm going to go pretty fast because I think we're getting short on time. You should save seeds only from your biggest and your best plants. This is where size matters. Those giant pumpkins, giant tomatoes. You want to save seeds from open pollinated varieties again, because the open pollinated varieties are going to grow true to type. They'll look like their parents. Let's see. Oh yeah, so I didn't know this. I thought this was interesting. I like bats, and I couldn't find any examples of vegetables here in Western Washington that are pollinated by bats, but bats are a big pollinator of vegetable companion plants like yarrow and French golden marigolds and evening primrose. So I'm hoping to see a bat one of these days in my yard. You want to let the seeds fully mature on the plant before you collect it. You don't want to pick the first or the last to ripen as the vegetable that you're going to save for seeds. This is really hard for me because when I'm in the middle of tomato season and I got these beautiful, luscious tomatoes, I'm just eating them. And by the time I think, oh, I should leave one on the plant to fully ripen so I can save the seeds, it's usually the last 2 or 3 tomatoes, and they're kind of sickly looking and sad. They don't taste the best. So if I save those fruits or vegetables to harvest seed from for next year, I'm going to get fruits and vegetables that, might be kind of sickly and sad and won't taste the best. So if you have the discipline, I'm still learning this, save it from the biggest and best plants from the middle of the season, not the first, not the last. The definition of what a fully mature plant is really depends. With tomatoes, you want to wait till they get, nice and big and fully ripe, gushy, hopefully not too moldy. Cucumbers, there's a picture here. You want them to be big and yellow and kind of squishy, way beyond when you would normally eat them. With zucchini and squashes, you want to wait until, again, they're fully ripe and they're hard. It's like knocking on a piece of wood, not something you would want to eat. Beans, that's easy. You just wait till they're really dry and they kind of rattle the pods. You want to make sure your seeds are fully dry before you store them. There's a bunch of ways to determine if they're fully dry. You can push them with your fingernail and see if they indent. The worst thing to do is to open up a seed package in the spring from seeds that you've saved and you've got moldy seeds. That's just no fun. You want to be able to, label and date your seed packets. It's really important. I'm not going to belabor this, but you will forget. And then you want to store them in cool, dry, and dark conditions. I have to laugh. The internet will show you all these ways of saving seeds. It doesn't have to be expensive. There are these photo storage cases that were really big about 2 years ago. These things, which, you put like all your tomato seeds in one and then all, different kinds. You organize your seeds this way. My seeds are organized exactly once a year, which is in the middle of winter when I have nothing else to do and I'm watching a movie and I'm bored. The rest of the time, I'm just taking seeds out and planting them and then throwing them back in the box. If you want to, you can spend money on this, but I think, it doesn't, you can do it very much more simply. I also laugh when I see pictures like this of all these pretty jars with seeds in them all lined up and labeled. First of all, this is too much light because you want to store your seeds in cool, dry, and dark conditions. Moisture, light, and heat are the enemy of seeds. So this is just too much light. It's also really expensive, and who has that kind of space, right? So what I do, I'm just going to get my box over here. This is how I save my seeds. It's a cardboard box. This works just fine. You can get fancy if you want. Also, let me go back to this. I forgot this. When you're drying your seeds, you can put them on a paper plate. Dollar store, 20 for, $1. I love the dollar store. You can put them on a piece of cardboard. Everybody's got an Amazon box. This is kind of a fancy pants one because it's got sides, but just any piece of cardboard. And some people swear by these because if you can see, it's double layered and there's some little corrugations here and air can get in so your seeds will dry faster. You can just pop them into a paper bag and just put them in a corner somewhere and forget about them until winter when you feel like worrying about them. You can't really over dry a seed, so don't worry about that. So there's really two kinds of main processing methods for vegetable seeds. One is called dry processing and wet processing. So dry processing is used for seeds that have in pods or husks. And these are your peas, corn, got them all here, carrots, turnips. They're the easiest seeds to process. I think it's just like processing flower seeds. You just wait until the seed or the flower is fully dried, and then you just rub them between your hands and separate the seeds from the husks or the chaff and save the seeds. Now, you'll see these fancy pants words like thresh and screen and, winnow. Those are just ways of saying separate the seed from the chaff, the husk or the part that you don't want. You can screen them here. I just rub them between my hands because it's free and it's easy. But you can make a screen thingy if you want to. If the seeds are really small, the seeds will fall through. You can put the seeds in a bowl, 2 bowls, and pass them back and forth and kind of blow, and the chaff will blow away and you'll be left with the seeds. Then you just want to let them dry completely and label and store them. If the seeds don't seem fully dry again, just put them in a paper bag or in a cardboard box or on a paper plate and let them fully dry. No biggie. Then there's wet processing, and there's two kinds of wet processing. One is wet processing without fermentation, and this is used for vegetables or fruits with what they call a gel sac or placental tissue. I just call it goo. And these are your eggplants, pumpkins, squash, and melons. So, I mean, you can see here, here's a squash. You know, the seeds are in this fleshy sort of container, this fruit, this vegetable, but the seeds themselves aren't really covered with any goo. You can pull them out. So this is really straightforward. You just take the seeds out, rinse them under running water to remove any flesh that might be adhering to them, and then let the seeds dry completely, and then label and store them. If you must spend money, cardboard coffee filters also work as a medium to dry them on. And the second way of processing, wet processing, is called wet processing with fermentation. Don't let this freak you out. It's just the same thing as like when you're making pickles or you are making sourdough bread starter. It's the same fermentation process. And this is used for the vegetables or fruits with goo. And those are tomatoes and cucumbers. They've got that kind of gooey thing around their seed. And that goo contains abscisic acid that prevents germination. For the science nerds among you, it actually inhibits the uptake of water by the embryonic plant. So this fermenting removes the goo. It kills any pathogens that might be around the seed there in that goo. It's the same thing that happens when the fruit or vegetable naturally rots, or it passes through an animal's gut. You can actually just let your tomatoes rot all by themselves. I did this as an experiment, and it worked. You know, the tomato just rotted fine, but my husband was not happy because I had it rotting on the kitchen counter, and we got gnats like crazy. So yeah, and it was gross. So, but it works. I mean, if you just take a half a tomato and you just put it outside, somebody was talking to me earlier, just put it outside in the dirt. Eventually, that tomato will naturally ferment. You'll start to see all the little seedlings coming out of it, like right here. That's the same process. You're just speeding that up. So what you want to do is you want to cut the fruit open. You scoop out the pulp with the seeds, and you place in a jar. I'm going to show you how easy. Jar. Fruit. See, you just squeeze it. So I have this picture here with this spoon, like I'm really going to use a spoon. As soon as I took that picture, I said, the heck with it, and I just got my finger in there. You just squeeze out the pulp and any seeds, and then I'm not going to dig around in here with my finger because I'm on camera, but that's it. And then you get some water. You pour the water in maybe like an inch. Swirl it around. Cover it. You don't actually technically have to cover it, but again, because if you don't cover it, you're going to get gnats like crazy. You just cover this loosely. What I do is I get a paper towel and I write down what it is, and I put that over the top like this, and then I fasten it with a rubber band. So it looks like this. And all you do is a couple of times a day, whenever you remember, just swirl that a little bit like this. And after a couple of days, you'll start to see fermentation start. You'll get kind of a floating mat of mold or fuzz on top of this. White mold is good. Black fuzz is not. Black is probably a bacterial infection, and you should throw it out and start again. Then, after a couple days, you'll see the separation between this floating mat of mold and bad seeds on the top. So the junk floats, the good seeds sink. So when you start to see this demarcation between the two layers, then you just pour off the top part of what's the liquid in here, rinse the remaining seeds in a strainer under running water, and spread them on a paper plate, whatever, anything except a paper towel, because if you put them on a paper towel, they will stick. I guarantee it. And then label and store them in, you know, a cool, dark, and dry place. I mean, it's easy peasy. Doesn't get much easier than that. So there are a lot of books that you'll see online about seed starting, but because I am thrifty, the best one that I found actually is online and it's free. It's called A Guide to Seed Saving, Seed Stewardship, and Seed Sovereignty. It's by the Seed Ambassadors Project. I got this from the Salmon Center up at Belfair, and they actually want you to distribute this. It's a pretty long printout. It's about 32 pages, but it contains a wealth of information on how to save different kinds of vegetable seeds and herb seeds. And this is a great resource for getting started. Just in closing, I just want to say have fun. You know, I'm not trained as a gardener the way a lot of other people are. I'm a science nerd, but try everything. You know, if it doesn't work, you're now a card-carrying member of the club, and, you know, just keep on trying. So, sure. I
want to make a quick note, which I noticed it's not a plant you talked about, but I just want to note it because we are in Western Washington, where we have a lot of plants in the carrot family.
Oh, yes.
That are wild and have varying levels of toxicity and can cross-pollinate with your cultivated carrots that you're planting in your garden. So I would either advise being very cautious, or carrot seeds really inexpensive.
Just
buy some carrots.
Good point.
Try everything else.
Try everything else. Yeah. I also have a bunch of jars here and some heirloom tomatoes. If anybody wants to come up and try it, I've got, you know, this is the easy way to do it right here. I'd love to have you guys come up and start your own fermenting of some Black Beauty heirloom tomatoes here.